Welcome to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into a topic that's reshaping European enterprise strategy right now. Agentic AI and what it means for organizations preparing for the EU AI Act enforcement deadline in 2026. Sam, this feels like a pivotal moment. Organizations are caught between two pressures simultaneously.
Absolutely, Alex. We're looking at a genuine inflection point. By August 2nd, 2026, the EU AI Act moves from guidelines to enforcement, and at the exact same time, Agentic AI, autonomous digital colleagues that can plan, decide, and execute without constant human direction, is becoming operationally viable. It's not a coincidence that Rotterdam, Europe's logistics hub, is leading the charge here.
Let's unpack what Agentic AI actually means because I think a lot of people are still conflating it with chatbots. What's the fundamental difference between a traditional chatbot and an agentic AI system?
Great question. A chatbot responds to queries. You ask about a shipment status, it gives you an answer. An agentic AI system? It's independent. It perceives real-time data, plans multi-step workflows autonomously, executes complex processes across integrated systems, and adapts based on feedback. Think Rotterdam Port Operations. A chatbot tells you about delays. An agentic system autonomously reroutes shipments, optimizes container loading, and coordinates with port authorities, all while maintaining compliance documentation.
That's a profound difference. And I see from Gartner Research that 62% of enterprises plan to deploy AI agents by 2026. That's not a niche technology. That's mainstream adoption on the horizon. Are organizations seeing real business value yet?
The numbers tell the story. McKinsey found that enterprises deploying agentic AI see 35% reduction in task completion time and 28% cost savings in operations where autonomous agents handle routine decision-making. But here's what really caught my attention. Rotterdam logistics providers running pilots demonstrated $2.3 million in annual savings per facility through optimized yard management alone. That kind of ROI is driving investment despite regulatory uncertainty.
$2.3 million per facility. That's compelling enough to justify the complexity of implementing these systems. But this brings us to the regulatory challenge you mentioned. The EU AI Act is moving from soft guidelines to enforcement. For organizations in Rotterdam and across Europe, what does that actually mean operationally?
The EU AI Act categorizes systems by risk level, and here's the critical part. Agentic AI systems frequently land in high-risk categories. We're talking about autonomous agents in HR making hiring decisions, financial services doing trading or credit decisions, safety-critical infrastructure like ports and autonomous vehicles, law enforcement applications, and educational assessment systems.
So if you're deploying an agentic AI system in any of those domains, and honestly that covers a lot of the enterprise use cases, you're dealing with high-risk classification. What does that compliance burden actually look like?
Extensive. High-risk systems require conformity assessments, detailed documentation of how the agent makes decisions, human oversight mechanisms built into the workflow, and full audit trails. This isn't optional. It's mandatory by August 2nd, 2026. And the stakes are serious. Non-compliance can trigger fines up to 6% of annual turnover.
6% of annual revenue. That's not a compliance friction point. That's an existential concern for most organizations. So what's the readiness situation right now? Are enterprises ahead of this deadline?
Not really. A 2024 audit found that 73% of mid-market organizations lack formal AI governance maturity assessments. These are the ones that are going to scramble in 2025. But here's the encouraging part. Organizations establishing governance maturity frameworks today have 3x higher success rates in hitting 2026 compliance. So there's still time, but the window is closing.
That 3-time success rate is striking. It suggests that governance isn't just compliance, it's actually enabling technology deployment. What does a governance maturity framework actually look like for an organization deploying agentic AI?
It starts with understanding your risk landscape. You map which AI agents are operating in high-risk domains, which ones affect fundamental rights, which ones handle personal data. Then you build infrastructure, governance policies, oversight mechanisms, audit capabilities. Third, you establish domain-specific language models, LLMs fine-tuned for your industry and regulatory context, because off-the-shelf models aren't going to meet compliance in high-risk scenarios.
Domain-specific language models. That's an interesting technical requirement that probably surprises some organizations. Why can't you just use a general-purpose LLM and bolt on compliance controls?
Because general-purpose models are trained on broad internet data and can't guarantee the consistency, accuracy, and auditability that regulated domains demand. If an agentic AI system is making credit decisions in a bank or hiring recommendations in HR, regulators want to see that the underlying model is designed for that specific context, with documented training data, validation processes, and bias testing. That's much harder with a generic model.
So you're essentially saying that regulatory compliance is forcing enterprises to invest in deeper customization of their AI infrastructure. That's a notable shift from the deploy and iterate mentality in tech. What's the practical roadmap for a Rotterdam enterprise that wants to get ahead of this?
First, conduct a governance readiness assessment immediately. Identify which business processes use or will use autonomous agents and classify them by regulatory risk. Second, establish an AI governance committee with representation from legal, compliance, operations, and technology. Third, start building domain-specific models for critical processes now. This takes time. Fourth, implement human-in-the-loop mechanisms for high-risk decisions, even if the agent is capable of autonomy.
Human-in-the-loop is interesting because it potentially limits the ROI advantage of full autonomous operation. How do organizations balance compliance oversight with operational efficiency?
It's not as limiting as it sounds. You don't need humans overseeing every decision. You need them overseeing decisions above risk thresholds. An agent optimizing container loading? That might run fully autonomous. An agent recommending workforce reductions? That requires human sign-off before execution. The framework lets you automate routine decisions and reserve human judgment for consequential ones.
That's a smart, risk-tiered approach. It sounds like the enterprises getting ahead of this aren't seeing regulation as pure constraint. They're using it as a design requirement to build more trustworthy and auditable systems. Is that the pattern you're seeing?
Exactly. The organizations winning right now view the EU AI Act not as an obstacle but as a competitive moat. They're building governance and auditability into their agentic AI systems from day one, which makes those systems more reliable, more trustworthy, and ultimately more deployable across regulated industries. In 2026, when compliance becomes mandatory, they'll have working systems. Everyone else will be rushing to retrofit governance onto existing deployments.
So the bottom line for enterprises, especially in logistics, manufacturing, and financial services where Rotterdam and the Netherlands have significant presence, is that 2026 isn't just a regulatory deadline. It's a business transformation opportunity for those moving strategically now. Sam, what's the one thing you'd want listeners to walk away with?
Start governance readiness assessments today, not in 2025. The difference between a 3-year runway and an 18-month scramble will determine whether your organization leads with autonomous agents or struggles to catch up. And invest in domain-specific AI infrastructure. It's not an afterthought. It's foundational.
That's excellent guidance. If you want the full deep dive into EU AI Act compliance requirements, governance frameworks, and implementation strategies for Agentic AI in enterprise, head over to EtherLink AI and find the complete article. There's substantial analysis on everything from risk classifications to concrete Rotterdam case studies. Thanks for joining us on EtherLink AI Insights, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Alex. Until next time, stay ahead of the curve on AI governance.